Most people spend their entire lives trying to become valuable, chasing credentials, chasing status, chasing the approval of rooms they were never invited into, and never once stopping to ask the question that actually matters, which is not how do I become valuable, but do I already think like someone who is? Because here is what the psychology of high performance, self concept research, and decades of behavioral science all converge on. The mindset precedes the outcome, always, without exception, in every domain of human achievement ever studied. The person who builds an extraordinary life does not first build the life and then develop the mindset. They first develop the mindset, and the life assembles itself around it like iron filings around a magnet. So today we are not going to talk about hustle or morning routines or productivity hacks. We are going to go deep into the actual psychological signs, the internal patterns, the cognitive signatures, the behavioral fingerprints that indicate a person is operating from a genuinely high value mindset. And some of these signs are going to surprise you because they look nothing like what social media has conditioned you to associate with being high value. Stay with me, because if even 3 or 4 of these signs resonate with something true inside you, you are already much further along than you think. The first and perhaps most foundational sign of a high value mindset is that you are no longer outsourcing your self-worth to external validation. And I want to be careful here, because this doesn't mean you don't care what people think, and it doesn't mean you don't appreciate recognition or praise. It means that your fundamental sense of okayness, your baseline belief that you are enough, that you are worthy of good things, that you belong in the rooms you enter, does not depend on whether someone else confirms it for you. Psychologists call this internal validation orientation, and it is one of the most reliably documented predictors of psychological health, resilience, and long-term achievement across cultures and demographics. The person without a high-value mindset is on a constant approval loop, performing for recognition, adjusting their opinions to match the dominant group, shrinking or expanding their personality depending on who is watching, and experiencing their self-worth as something that fluctuates with every piece of feedback they receive from the outside world. The person with a high-value mindset has built what psychologists call a stable self-concept, a consistent, grounded sense of identity that doesn't dissolve under criticism, doesn't inflate under praise, and doesn't require the audience's applause to remain standing. This stability is not arrogance, it is the psychological foundation upon which every other high-value behavior is built. Because you cannot make courageous decisions, set honest boundaries, or pursue unconventional paths if your sense of self is dependent on the approval of the people around you. The second sign is one that most people misread entirely, and that is that you are deeply comfortable with silence, solitude, and your own company. In a culture that treats busyness as a virtue and constant social stimulation as the norm, the person who genuinely enjoys spending time alone, who doesn't need noise or distraction, or the constant presence of others to feel okay about themselves, is demonstrating one of the rarest and most significant signs of psychological development. Research by psychologist Ari Kruglansky on the need for cognitive closure found that people with low self-worth and high anxiety have an elevated need for external stimulation precisely because silence forces them into contact with their own thoughts. And their own thoughts are not a comfortable place to be when your internal world is defined by self-doubt, unresolved conflict, and a fragile self-concept. The high-value mindset individual doesn't flee their inner world. They inhabit it. They use solitude not as a punishment, but as a resource. They think in silence, they process in silence, they create in silence, and they emerge from that silence with a clarity of direction and a quality of decision that people who are constantly stimulated simply never develop. The third sign, and this one separates the genuinely high-value mindset from its performance, is that you have learned to be honest about your limitations without it threatening your identity. Most people exist in one of two dysfunctional relationships with their own weaknesses. Either they deny them, which prevents growth, or they catastrophize them, which prevents action. The high-value mindset person does neither. They have developed what psychologists call ego strength, the capacity to look at the parts of yourself that are underdeveloped, mistaken, or outright wrong, and to engage with that reality with curiosity rather than shame. They can say, "I was wrong about that," without it meaning I am a wrong person. They can say, "I don't know how to do this yet," without it meaning I am fundamentally incapable. This separation of behavior from identity, the understanding that what you do and what you know are not the same as who you are, is a cognitive sophistication that takes years to develop and represents one of the clearest markers of genuine psychological maturity and high-value thinking. The fourth sign is that your relationship with time has fundamentally changed. Specifically, that you have become acutely protective of it in a way that other people sometimes misread as coldness or aloofness. The high-value mindset person understands, at a level that feels almost physical, that time is the only truly non-renewable resource in a human life, and that every hour spent in an environment, relationship, or activity that doesn't serve their growth, their peace, or their purpose is an hour that can never be recovered. This is why they say no more than most people, not out of selfishness, but out of a deeply considered understanding of opportunity cost that most people never develop because they've never been taught to treat their time as having genuine worth. Research by economist Sendhil Mullainathan confirms that high-performing individuals across industries share a disproportionately high tendency to guard their time aggressively, to delegate anything that can be delegated, to eliminate anything that can be eliminated, and to invest their remaining hours in the activities and relationships that have the highest return on their most important values. And this protective relationship with time is not just a productivity strategy. It is a statement of self-worth. It is the behavioral declaration that your hours have value, that your presence is not free, and that the decision of where you direct your finite attention is one of the most important decisions you will ever make. The fifth sign is that you have developed a functional and healthy relationship with failure. And I want to be precise about what this means, because it is not the toxic positivity version where you pretend failure doesn't hurt, or the performative resilience version where you post inspirational quotes while quietly falling apart. A genuine high-value relationship with failure means that you experience it fully. You feel the disappointment. You acknowledge the gap between expectation and reality. You sit with the discomfort long enough to extract everything it has to teach you. And then you integrate it rather than being defined by it. Carol Dweck's decades of research at Stanford on growth mindset versus fixed mindset maps almost perfectly onto this. The high-value thinker experiences failure as an update to their model of reality, as information about what they need to develop, as a redirection rather than a rejection. And this relationship with failure is not just psychologically healthy, it is strategically superior because the person who can fail repeatedly, learn consistently, and return with compounded skill and knowledge will always outperform the person who avoids failure by avoiding the kinds of bold action that meaningful success requires. The sixth sign is one that is deeply counterintuitive in an era of personal branding and self-promotion. And that is that you are genuinely invested in the success of other people. Not performatively, not strategically, not because you expect a return, but because you have reached a level of psychological abundance where someone else's success genuinely does not threaten yours. The high-value mindset operates from a fundamentally non-zero sum model of human potential. It understands that the success of people around you expands the total available possibility in your world rather than diminishing your share of it, that helping someone else think more clearly, act more boldly, or move further toward their potential is an act that enriches the ecosystem you both inhabit. And the practical return on this genuine investment in others, in terms of trust, reciprocity, deep relationships, and the kind of reputation that opens doors that no amount of self-promotion can, is one of the most consistently documented advantages of the high-value mindset across every field of human achievement. The seventh sign is that you have a clear internalized value system that governs your decisions, and that you make decisions based on that value system rather than based on social pressure, momentary emotion, or the shifting expectations of your environment. This is what psychologists call values clarity, and research by Shalom Schwartz on human values across cultures consistently shows that individuals with high values clarity demonstrate better decision-making, higher life satisfaction, stronger resilience under pressure, and greater consistency between their intentions and their actions. The high-value mindset person doesn't need to think too hard about most decisions because they've already done the deep work of establishing what matters most to them. And the decision simply becomes a question of whether the choice aligns with that established hierarchy of values. This is why they seem decisive in situations where others seem paralyzed. It's not that they have more information, it's that they have a clearer internal compass, and a clear compass makes navigation relatively simple, even in complicated terrain. The eighth sign is that your inner dialogue has undergone a fundamental shift, from the voice of a critic to the voice of a coach. Psychological research on self-talk, developed extensively by Dr. Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan, demonstrates that the way you internally narrate your own experience has profound consequences on your emotional state, your cognitive performance, and your behavioral choices. The low-value mindset inner voice is a prosecutor. It catalogs every mistake, anticipates every failure, interprets ambiguous situations as threats, and maintains a running commentary of inadequacy that drains cognitive bandwidth and emotional energy simultaneously. The high-value mindset inner voice is a coach. It acknowledges difficulty without catastrophizing it, identifies mistakes without condemning the person who made them, maintains a baseline orientation of possibility rather than threat, and speaks to the self with the same combination of honesty and compassion that the best mentor you've ever had would bring to your worst day. Kross's research on what he calls distanced self-talk, the practice of referring to yourself by name rather than in the first person when processing difficult emotions, found that this simple technique dramatically improved emotional regulation, decision quality, and performance under pressure, because it creates enough psychological distance from the immediate emotional experience to activate the more rational, perspective taking parts of the brain. The high value mindset person has, through years of self examination, developed an inner dialogue that functions as an asset rather than a liability. The ninth sign is perhaps the most quietly powerful of all, and that is that you have become a student of your own patterns. Not in a self obsessed way, not in the endless navel gazing of someone who has confused self analysis with self improvement, but in the precise observational way of someone who understands that the most important data set available to them is the record of their own behavior, their own reactions, their own recurring emotional responses, and cognitive biases. High value mindset individuals journal, reflect, and review not because it was recommended in a productivity book, but because they have experienced firsthand the compounding returns of self knowledge. The way that understanding why you behave as you do gives you genuine choice about whether to continue that behavior, which is the only real definition of freedom that has ever mattered. They notice their triggers before the triggers detonate. They recognize their avoidance patterns before the avoidance costs them something important. They see their biases at work in real time and make the effort to correct for them, which produces decision quality and interpersonal intelligence that people who don't examine themselves simply cannot replicate. The 10th sign, and we are going to finish here because this is the one that contains all the others, is that you are genuinely, non-performatively at peace with being misunderstood. Not resigned to it, not proud of it for its own sake, but at peace with it. Because you understand that being fully understood by everyone requires making yourself small enough, simple enough, and safe enough to fit inside the comfort zone of everyone who observes you, and that the cost of that universal legibility is the surrender of everything that makes you genuinely worth understanding. The high-value mindset person has developed the psychological security to hold their own vision even when no one around them sees it yet, to make the decision that aligns with their values even when others interpret it as strange, to walk the road that their deepest self knows is right even when the external evidence hasn't caught up yet to confirm it. This is not stubbornness. It is self-trust. And self-trust, built through thousands of small, kept promises to yourself, through failures honestly processed, through values consistently honored, through solitude courageously inhabited, through validation gracefully declined. Self-trust is not just a sign of a high-value mindset. It is the destination that every other sign on this list is pointing toward. It is the psychological home that everything we've discussed today is trying to build. And if even a part of you recognize yourself in these signs, if even one of these patterns felt familiar, felt true, felt like something you are actively becoming, then you are already living proof that the mindset we've been describing is not a personality type you were born with or denied, but a psychological posture that any human being, in any circumstance, at any point in their life, can choose to inhabit, deepen, and ultimately make the permanent architecture of who they are.